Kerry, we have a wonderful group of people from a great cross-section of the university here who've been reading this book and are delighted to spend some time. Could you begin, as you did yesterday, telling us just a little bit about what this experience of writing this book has been like for you and for your own religious experience in Lent?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you all for being here and for welcoming me into your lunchtime, at least virtually. And I have to say I identify more with the lunch crowd than with the breakfast crowd, as Ian said. So thank you again. And I think for me, the book was really a process. And when I set out to write a book, I knew I wanted to write about something that was meaningful to me, because you spend so much time with that topic. And so as I was, and I knew that if I was going to write about something that was meaningful to me, I really wanted to be honest about it. And I wanted whatever I wrote to really reflect how I felt during that time, and not kind of to wait till the end and then write things down and then go back and look at what had happened with sort of rose-colored glasses and say, oh yes, oh I remember feeling so benevolent to that person when I was there, or oh I remember feeling so rejuvenated, when really I was tired or crabby or whatever. So, as I went through the process, I was writing sometimes early in the morning, sometimes late at night, sometimes on my phone, on the subway, after I went somewhere, because I really wanted to get down how I felt throughout the entire process. And at the core of it, I think, was this idea of jump-starting my own spirituality, how easy it is for us to think that there's this list of these corporal works of mercy and they feed the hungry. Of course we feed the hungry. It seems so simple. And when I was realizing I wasn't really doing those things as often as I might and as often as I could. And I was hoping to find something that really sort of stuck with me beyond that process. So it was not just, oh, let me have this experience and I'll write about it and I'll be done with it. It was, well, how is this going to change me? What is it going to do? And I think part of what it helped me to do is to feel more prepared in some ways, to have this kind of mercy mindset, this idea that I'm ready and willing to recognize mercy and to try to be mercy in the world. And I think both of those things are important, because I think it's very easy to not recognize the small things that we think are small things, but are really sort of sacramental opportunities where these works of mercy occur in our daily lives, things that we might already do, ways that we might already serve people, and to lift those up, to be able to recognize those in this mercy mindset, to see the whole point in these everyday actions, like a mother who is a young mother might not be able to make it to a soup kitchen or something, but by taking care of those very corporal bodily needs of a child, those are also works of mercy, and to recognize that as such. And then, by recognizing those small things, to then be able to be kind of open to react to other acts of mercy, other opportunities for mercy as they arise. I think a lot of us think, like in New York City, there's so many people in need sometimes on the street, or the train station, wherever we go, and we think that it's easy to just sort of walk by someone and say, oh, I wasn't prepared to react to that. I wasn't prepared to respond in a way that would have been meaningful, or in a way I didn't have $1 or whatever that might be. But throughout this process, I've learned from people how they kind of prepare themselves for these moments, and part of it is through prayer, and part of it is by, literally some people have, a card with shelter information that they'll give to somebody, or a box of granola bars, or that they can hand out to people, or just being ready to acknowledge the humanity in the people that we meet. So it's kind of become this continual process for me, and what I was writing about, well beyond even needing to write about it specifically, but really just kind of entering into that mindset. And it's a challenge, because it's created all these other communities for me to be a part of in some ways, and for these communities to encourage me, and it's really helpful, because when you write a book about mercy, people expect you to show it. So it's kind of raised the bar and held me accountable in a lot of ways, which is good.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kerry. We're going to spend a little bit of time and invite people here. Maureen and I each have a microphone to make it easier for her to hear us. Anybody willing to say something about your experience of reading Kerry's book and what it's meant for you this year? Just raise your hand and we'll get you a microphone. Please, Joan.
Hi, Kerry. I'm Joan.
Joan, could each of us say who we are and where we're coming from?
Okay, I'm Joan Lanahan, retired chaplain at Creighton. And I come in for all kinds of things like this. First, a couple kudos. I found your book very easy to read. And when I think of my own siblings who are now in their 60s, who haven't studied a lot of theology and spirituality, I think it would appeal to them. So I'm going to get it for a couple people. Also, I find it's a good mentoring book for people who need to find a way, you know. I also admire your generosity, and I hope you've learned to take quick naps. Because it looks like you don't sleep much. My question is, are there any of these works of mercy, I figure, are there any of these works of mercy you're still involved in? I hope you're not involved in all of them right now, but which one did you latch on to?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Thank you for those kind words. And I think that question was one of the questions that I really hoped to answer coming out of this. Which one of these really speaks to me, and what one do I feel like I can move forward with in a meaningful way? And I think the one that really stuck out to me was visiting the imprisoned. And it was a really powerful experience for me to visit San Quentin and to talk with the men there and to talk with the chaplain there and to kind of see that those sort of surprising similarities between some aspects of my life and the lives of the men in prison. And I guess as I wrote about the idea of going to see them as people in prison, not as a prisoner or a criminal or kind of some other. And so I've actually been in touch with the chaplain at San Quentin since last fall. I went to Rwanda to do an article for American Magazine about the reconciliation and forgiveness and restorative justice there since the 1994 genocide. And I was telling the chaplain about this trip, and he said to me, "Oh, we have a restorative justice program at San Quentin. If you get a chance, you should come out to San Quentin and you should talk to the guys there and talk to them about the restorative justice in Rwanda, and they can kind of speak about their experience of restorative justice here." And my first reaction was that I was entirely unqualified to do this, and that it seemed a little overwhelming to sort of be that go-between. But I think when I began to see it as I get to bring the stories from the people I spoke with in Rwanda to the guys that I can speak with at San Quentin and kind of just connect people across continents just through their own stories and be the conduit for that. It was very, very humbling and very moving. And so I went just a couple weeks ago in March back to San Quentin, and the guys could not have been more welcoming, and I was nervous because I wasn't sure who was going to show up or how many people or whether people would be engaged. Because it's easy to think, oh, all right, they'll show up because it's the alternatives are even worse, or it looks good for parole or whatever. But the people that showed up, those guys were really engaged, and they asked great questions, and they spoke about their own struggles with forgiveness and forgiving themselves. And you know, the guy that introduced me was calling on texts from The Sun, the literary magazine, and from Kathleen Norris, and it was, you know, it was really impressive. And he was one of the inmates there, and I think you know, their questions really brought out how much these kinds of conversations and visits and hearing those other stories meant to them. And one of the guys was comparing the Hutu and the Tutsi to the Crips and the Bloods, and how he was in the Crips, and how he saw the tensions in some ways as similar, or the efforts for reconciliation. And this is not any kind of comparison that I ever would have made myself. But it was a real one, and it was meaningful, and I was just very, very moved by that visit. And so I've tried to start getting more involved in that kind of ministry here in New York, although it's also continues to be hard to get responses from people about exactly what they need and when you can go, but I'm working on it. So that's the one that I hope to kind of become more actively involved in, and that I've been grateful to be able to do a little bit more with outside of the context of the book. So thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else have some comment about what you think, Lori?
Hi, I'm Lori Gillespie, and I work in the College of Professional Studies at Creighton, which is our adult students that are working on their undergraduate degrees. I use this with my family, so I shared this with the group a couple of weeks ago, but thought I'd share it with you so that maybe you can tell others that it could be a nice family project. I have 2 teenage children, a boy and a girl, and so every night our 4 of us would read a chapter from their book and discuss it, and it makes for, you know, an easy read. Each chapter to be a family discussion during the dinner time, and then kind of an impetus to do things together then in terms of the Works of Mercy, but also just to discuss it. And I think your honesty in the book, you know, really resonates with teenagers in terms of, you know, I think these are some of the things I'm thinking myself, but she's articulating it in a book like this. So it was very helpful, I think, for the family journey.
Thank you, thank you. That sounds like a wonderful time together as a family. So thank you, and thank you. I'm honored to have been a part of it in some way. Yeah, I think that that's sort of been an interesting part of writing the book for me, has been having had my friends read it and people that I know who sort of didn't really know what I was doing exactly while I was doing it. So they knew I was kind of doing this whole Works of Mercy thing, and I think they kind of were like, yeah, Kerry's kind of quirky, she's up to her sort of thing. And but I had some really good, meaningful conversations with friends around it afterwards, because I think it's helped to kind of open up a conversation where it's not any books that. The nice thing about having conversations about books is that books can bring up the topics for you, and then you can discuss sort of what comes out of that and respond to that, rather than necessarily having to start with your own experience. So it's been nice to start conversations with my friends as well, which has been really helpful. So I'm glad that it's been useful too. Thank you.
Kat?
Hello, Kerry. I'm Kat King. I am a graduate student at studying negotiation and dispute resolution, and also a graduate assistant in our Center for Service and Justice here on campus. And there were 2 things I wanted to comment on, I think kind of themes that I had heard throughout our discussions, and then also things that were important to me. You used humor a lot and beautifully, not only in your writing, but also it was clear that you are gentle and with yourself, and you approach experiences and interactions with a sense of lightness and joy and humor, which leads into the second point, is just being gentle with yourself and just trying. And I said this last week, but just sort of you have to take a step, but do it lightly and gently. And so thank you for sharing that with us. And is that something that you have found has, like, when, have you always been that way? When did that start in your life? And like, do you find that you have continued to do it even without thinking about how to write it in a book?
Thank you. That's a good question. So, it's something that actually when I was in the Mercy Volunteer Corps, one of the Sisters of Mercy who was at our orientation used the phrase to go gently and to be gentle with yourself quite a bit. And I think that was the first time that I had ever really heard someone use that word in that way, so to proceed gently, or that you could even be gentle with yourself. And I think that it stuck with me there, because at that time I was going to a place where I had never been, with people I never knew, and I was doing a job that I didn't know if I could do. And so I think when you're faced with so much uncertainty, you can either panic or you can just kind of go gently. And I think and go with humor, and that's always sort of seemed like the better option to me. Although I've had my share of panicking, but I think when I'm able, that always has seemed like the best way to go if possible. And I think that when you proceed, knowing that you're really not alone, like when you feel part of a faith community, or that you just know that God is with you, it's easier to be gentle with yourself, because you know that it's not, that you have that support, and that where you fail, other people might be able to pick you up. And when you screw up, someone else might be able to kind of help you get back on the path. And there's a priest very kindly sent me a recording of a homily that he had done, where he had mentioned my book, and as I listened to it, he was saying, she has this way that she tries to do these things, and it's, she's kind of bumbling, and she really, like, he could not emphasize enough how little I knew what I was talking about. Like, I didn't know what's going on. You're right. Like, I was like, okay, great, I get it. It was emphasized greatly that, that I really was just like a regular person trying to do something. And I think that in some ways it's a wonderful gift to kind of not put that pressure on yourself, to not say, I'm not an expert in this, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to try, and it doesn't mean, none of us are perfect. And I think a lot of times we allow the idea that we won't do something perfectly to kind of get in the way of starting. And so I think rather than not starting, just starting gently is the best way for me to go. We think, if I can't, do all these things all the time, all in this way, then there's no reason to start. But there is a reason to start, and it's God is calling us through the gospel to do these things. And I think part of it is trying to find something that's sustainable for us. And when you're in the sense that doing one work of mercy every week for the rest of my life and checking them off is not really sustainable. And as was mentioned, I probably would not get very much sleep. But if I try to, but also doing no works of mercy and disconnecting and saying, well, I'm just going to watch Breaking Bad on Netflix all weekend and not care about everybody, then that's not sustainable either. So it's how you find that balance between taking care of others, taking care of yourself, taking care of the community, looking after the common good, and so I think the only way to kind of balance all those things is to use that gentleness and the humor that you mentioned. So thank you. That's a good question. Thank you for your time.
Mike.
Hello, my name is Mike Rios, and I'm also a graduate assistant in the Center for Service and Justice with Kat, and I'm getting my master's in ministry. And I really enjoyed the book, and one of the things that we talked about last week a bit at my table was the idea that I can speak for myself that a lot of times I like to be in control of when mercy happens. So it's like this weekend I'm going to go do this, and that will be very merciful and do it in kind of like this volunteer like box. And then outside of that, I don't really have an obligation to do that. And you kind of brought it up before when you were saying that sometimes we don't feel prepared. Like I wasn't prepared to act in that way. And kind of an analogy that came to me last week when we were talking and reading was that it seems like if we use the metaphor of like a play and the actors, like the scenes that are going on, we think that maybe what is happening has to be, you know, the ministry, and we have to be actors who are doing those things, when it seems like you're trying to tell us we have to find a way to make the backdrop. We have to try and so that, I mean, the subtitle of your book of keeping your day job, so you can still be, you know, be this actor who's an accountant or whatever, but try and make it work it into the scenery, work it into the backdrop of this kind of life. And so I guess my question for you is, are there little tips that you found to better prepare yourself as you use that language of like being prepared, or like working it into the day-to-day without, like you said, checking it off of a list, you know, once a week?
Right. No, yeah, that's an excellent point and really good question. And I think part of it is not, because I tended to do that myself, is to create like a silo. Like, this is my volunteer time, and this is my work time, and this is my family time, and this is my friend time, and kind of separate all those things out. And when I'm not in my volunteer time, I don't have to respond to mercy. I don't have to respond to these needs because I already did enough. Like, I met my quota of the day. And I've tried to move away from that and to respond in more ways. And some of the ways are some of the things I mentioned, like trying to just be prepared, like literally just putting when asks me for money, I don't have to finger at the desk. Oh, are they worthy of my dollar? What happens? You know, like if it just seems like I feel like this is what I should do at that point, I don't have to say, well, I don't have time to pull out my purse or blah, blah, blah. And then you can just respond and be ready so that you have it in your head that this could happen and what do I want to do in that moment? And you know it's going to happen. And I think going through starting the day with prayer and trying to center yourself in that mercy mindset, or ending the day with the examine, maybe the nation examine, where you go back through the day and say, here's where I managed to show mercy, and how was I ready to do that, and here's where I didn't manage to show mercy, and why wasn't I prepared to do that, and then try to make those adjustments. And sometimes it's our schedules, and sometimes it's our attitude, and sometimes we just have a bad day. And like I said, you can't be expected to be perfect at it. And I think one of the things that's been really helpful to me is community, is knowing that, like, I joined the Mercy Associates, as I write about, and having a group, even just we meet, you know, once a month, having a group with which to discuss these things, and knowing that I can go there to kind of be rejuvenated and to think about how I'm responding with mercy, how I'm failing to respond with mercy, how others respond to mercy, and see how they respond at different points in their lives, at different times of the day or the week even, just and learning from others' experience, because I think a lot of times we feel like we're alone in not knowing how to respond to somebody in need, whether it's a person on the street or a prison system or you know, housing crisis. In any way, we think sometimes it's easy to think I'm the only one who has no idea what's going on here, and or you know, I'm going to look silly if I don't know if I don't know how to respond, and so I'm going to just stay away from that. And I think just being able to learn from each other, being able to find people who seem to be good models of mercy, and asking, hey, how can I get more involved in this? How do I do this? Or what do I do in this situation? Why? I mean, we've had some really interesting conversations at our Mercy Associates meetings of how, responding in different ways can still be merciful. There's not one single merciful response to each situation. And so recognizing that as well and the value of that, and not putting too much pressure on yourself. And sometimes good intentions are, you have the best of intentions and things still kind of fall on their face. I wanted to try to get involved more with the feeding the hungry aspect. So I went to this, if I could just share a brief story with you. I went to this program that connects sandwiches with commuters. So they give, you go to the central location and they give you like 4 bags of sandwiches and they give you 14 members, and then you are sent off into the city on your way home so that you kind of, as you go home, can offer food to whoever you see in need, and then you're on your way. So it's kind of convenient. You feel good about yourself, and you theoretically help some people on the way. So I go, and now there's 5 of us, and we have our 20 sandwiches, and we're sent off to Penn Station. And if you've ever been to Penn Station, you know that there are tons of people in need in Penn Station. Frequently, people sleeping in the hallways, people asking for food or money. And so, to be honest, we kind of felt a little like, oh good, this is going to be easy. We're just going to go to Penn Station, and then these two guys who need to catch the Long Island Railroad can go straight home from there, and that's going to be, great, and we'll have all our sandwiches. And we are just wandering around Penn Station, and there is nobody in there to give sandwiches to. And so now, then we're all just kind of like these. We don't really know each other, and we're kind of trying to be polite and look for people who sort of, I don't know, look homeless. Like, what is that? What is that? And there's these people with like tons of bags around them in their coats, and they look like they're tired and they've been there a while. And then we sort of veer toward them, and then veer away, realizing they've been waiting for an Amtrak train for hours. They're just and so we go outside, and we manage to give away some sandwiches, and I'm getting yelled at by this guy, like, hey, I want a sandwich, and he's and I'm looking at him, and he doesn't look like he needs a sandwich, but then you're going, who am I to judge? Like, for instance, how do I know if you need a sandwich or not, and what is the, level of hunger that is required for me to eat a sandwich that I want to get rid of anyway? And so this situation is just kind of like, we're out there, and we go, and finally we hand out almost all the sandwiches, and we're behind Penn Station. And we come across a group of 20 guys, and they all are clearly in need of a sandwich. And we only have 2 sandwiches left. And we kind of give them the sandwiches, and we give them our apologies. And the Long Island Railroad guys start running away to the train. And we go home, and I'm just so defeated, because I feel like this is not a relationship. This is not help any kind of systemic injustice. It's just kind of made everyone feel a little bit bad. And I go home, and the next day I go into work, and Father Jim Martin, who I'm sure you're familiar with, is one of my coworkers, and he comes to my office, and he says, how was your evening? And I said, not great. And he said, what did you do? And I told him about going to Penn Station, and I told him about the sandwiches, and the meeting with people who were homeless, and he said, well, you should write about that. You should write about that. And I said, oh, I don't know, really. It's a little strange. And he said, no, you should, because you can call the chapter, Lead Us Not into Penn Station. And I was like, all right, I appreciate that. But it is, I think, at the core of it, as I talked to it, is that the situation presents these larger questions of, how do we respond to both individual needs and the needs of our community? How do we respond at times when it's inconvenient, or when we'd rather not, and when it's easier to just go home? How do we make sure that what we're doing is sort of trying to build up a larger community? And so it doesn't always work out the way you think, but you learn from it, and you say, okay, maybe that's not where I want to go. And that sandwich experience was very different than handing out sandwiches at the bread line, where it felt much more deliberate, where people, it felt more like, we're here as long as you need us to be here, as long as we have sandwiches, and and the people that were coming to sort of seek that. There was a little bit more of a mutuality to it, and more potential for relationship. So even just kind of looking at how you give out a sandwich, it was really helpful to me to try to figure out how do I better prepare to do this in a way that is going to be meaningful and helpful. And I think sometimes even in the bread line, it was easy to think, it doesn't matter if I'm here. Like literally, almost anybody could do this, and why am I here? And it's really early, and I should probably just be in bed. And I think when you look at it as, okay, am I here just to hand out sandwiches, or am I here to build relationships? Am I here to be present to other people? And if I'm here to be present to other people, then you become irreplaceable. Then you become, it does matter that you're there, because you're the only person who can be you there. And that is meaningful. That means something, and it brings a weight to the actions. And so just even preparing yourself to think about what your attitude is going to be going into a situation can be helpful in sort of extending that mindset of mercy into other aspects of your life. So,
That's a nice answer. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Alice Smith, and I work at Creighton. I actually work in medical school with their technology, so probably nothing to do with service investments. I love reading your book, but I would like to ask, you do a lot of explaining of a wide variety of acts of mercy that you do. It's the point of the book. And so, your attempts at being part of serving people in a variety of ways. And you talk about how to prepare for them and what you came across when you did it. And you spoke of the impact it would have on the people that you work with. And you can read between the lines and hear what you think you've gained from that. But I would love to hear you say what you've gained from this effort. And I think it sounds as if it's an ongoing effort. It didn't end when the book was done. But what do you find is what you personally have gained from this in ways that surprised you and even in ways that didn't surprise you? That's what I would ask.
Sure, thank you. So what have I gained from this in ways that have surprised me or not surprised me? That was the end of the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think what I have gained is a real awareness, and in some ways that's exactly of this need for mercy in the world, and of the need to try to be that mercy and to recognize it. And so in some ways that's what I expected, and in some ways it's surprising, because I think, I wanted to become more aware of this mercy, but I think I was surprised to find out exactly what that meant, and to find out exactly how many ways that could be lived out, and to find out how easy it was for me to pass by people and not think of them as people. And that's not necessarily a good thing to be surprised about yourself, but I think it's good to recognize that as something that I needed to work on. And I think as I went through the process, it became easier and easier to make sure I saw people as people, and then in some ways that makes everything a little bit harder, a little bit more difficult, because that means you have to change. It means you have to change how you live. It means you have to change certain attitudes, and it means sometimes you're going to be uncomfortable, and sometimes you're going to be out of your element. And then again, what surprised me about that was how much I kind of appreciated being pushed outside of those limits as well. So it was sort of this cycle of being scared to be pushed out of that, and then in kind of appreciating that stretching and that growth, despite the fact that it's a little bit scary at times. And so I think, and I think I've also been pleasantly surprised by how many other people had these same questions. Because I think I was thinking that everyone else had this all figured out. That everyone else was really great at being merciful, and I was sort of this hack that had no idea what she was doing. And it was nice to hear the struggles of other people, and to read and to hear from my friends, and even just the people that I met, and to try to realize that we're all in this together, and that it isn't just an isolated quest or a singular problem.
Hi, Kerry. My name is Pam Font-Gable. I'm a Creighton alumni and the very exhausted mother of 3 young kids. So I read your book late at night, which was really nice. It was just a really relaxing thing for me to read. I also write for CRS. So I am really glad that you got the experience to go on the trip to Rwanda, because those trips are really amazing for people. And Maureen and Andy gave us your article that you wrote about it, so I really enjoyed reading that too. And my question has to do a little bit, you talked at the very end of your book about solidarity. We do our best, we do not write people off, we challenge, we encourage, we love, but together we become better. And I'm curious about how your idea of solidarity changed before you wrote the book to afterwards, and with these experiences that you've had.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a good question, and it's great that you're also working with CRS. They're such a great organization. I think what happened is that I saw when I joined the Mercy Volunteer Corps, there was a song that played very frequently called "The Circle of Mercy," and it's a lovely tune. It's very high pitched. It's not easy to sing. But it talks about these, like, the circles of mercy sort of like expanding and being timeless, and I think, so what happened in this was that my sense of who I was in solidarity with, got bigger. I was in solidarity with, with my family, with my friends, with the church, in the sense of like, oh, we're all sort of in this together, but I think going through this process helped me to see, the men in San Quentin, they are part of the body of Christ, and it is up to us to make sure they know that they are. To make sure that we know, and to make sure to remind ourselves that they are a part of this as well. It's not people we're in solidarity with are not just the people that we see every day or the people that we meet on the street even. It's people who are in need everywhere, and we can't do all things for all people all the time, but even just to remember people in prayer, and even just to kind of be united in that sense, and to have that true compassion, that suffer with that sense of trying, in a sense, through either sharing someone's story, or listening to somebody, or just really being present. When I stayed at the overnight homeless shelter, and the guys there, my friends were kind of laughing at me because they were like, well, isn't that really like their house and they're hosting you, and like I'm not sure you're actually housing the homeless. It's more their house than yours. And, the guys are like, great, now we can walk around in our boxer shorts tonight because the lady's here. And it really meant circle for the truth. And then as we got talking, I think my sense of having them allow me to be part of their community, it was really powerful because I think, it's easy to go into somewhere and think, I'm going to be in solidarity with somebody by allowing them, into my world, and then we're all in this together, rather than saying, I'm going to be in solidarity with somebody by sort of gently going forward with someone together into their space and allowing them to lead me. And so being able to realize, to be merciful, it's not like, all right, it's necessarily my job to tell everyone where to be in this circle of mercy. It's to allow myself to be a part of it and to have it be spirit-led and to allow other people to open up their hearts and show me mercy as well. And so to have more of that covenant relationship, that idea of we make a mutual promise to each other. It's not just, oh, I pledge to help you. We pledge to be it together. And then that's with anybody in our community, anyone. Yeah.
Hi, Kerry. My name is Jan. I'm in the College of Nursing. Thank you for your book. I have to tell just a little story that happened last night that I am going to attribute to your book that made me rethink. I was leaving work and on my way to attend our stewardship committee at the church I belong to. And I only give myself just enough time to get up there because it's like 4 blocks from here. So as I'm driving, I see somebody who clearly could probably use a ride. But I go whizzing by, and I get about 2 more blocks, and I'm like, here I am. I think I got to get to this stewardship committee. And I just passed somebody who really needed some help. So I turned around and I went back and I asked her if I could give her a ride. She did say no, but I find that there's so many times in my life that I just pass people by because I think I'm so busy and needed somewhere else. And so I think reading your book, it's kind of given me a framework to rethink, just the little things. It doesn't have to be the big things, but just those little things. I just have one other thing I would like to bring up, especially since you just spoke about the homeless retreats. Here in Omaha, we have a program called Ignatian Spirituality Project. Not sure if you've heard of that, where we provide homeless retreats for women and ladies. We're in our 4th year. And when you're talking about the relationships, we actually, these ladies get to come to, we have a retreat house where we actually bring them to. And it's just powerful to get to know these individuals. Instead of, judging who they are and why they're there, I just find that because they're very good about telling their story, and to me it's just been powerful. And I was just wondering if that's something that you heard of, and maybe, I know they're in 20 cities in the United States, and so if that might be something that not necessarily you need to do, because it sounds like you have a full plate, but if there's anything that you would like some information on, for anybody that might be interested in something like that there in New York City, that would be something that I would be willing to help you with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that sounds like a really, really wonderful program. And Ignatian spirituality is something that to me is fascinating because I spend so much time at work talking about our faith and justice and talking with Jesuits and so talking about Ignatian spirituality sometimes, that sometimes I forget to actually do it. Like it's hard to separate sometimes my work from my spirituality because it's so entwined. So when I come home and I think, all right, I'm going to put work away for a little while, I have to remember not to put the spirituality and the justice and the God part of the work away with it. because it is so intertwined. And it's because I have friends who work in like banking or finance, and they're like, oh, I don't know how to bring these things together. And I'm like, I don't know how to take them apart and kind of look at one in a way so that I don't forget to just think of these things as part of my day job, to think of them as part of my life. So I need to make sure to keep that balance. And that program sounds like a really interesting way to approach that. So thank you. I'd love more information on that. And I think also that I can really relate to your story about passing someone by, I think I wrote about going to the red line and then leaving the red line and walking by someone on the street and just being like, okay, God, I'm done. I did my red line thing. I don't need to help anybody else now. Or kind of like rushing off to a very well-intentioned meeting and in the process, ignoring someone in need. So it's always about that balance and about being present. And I haven't perfected that, but I appreciate hearing how honest your struggle with that was, and your decision to kind of go back and do what you thought needed to be done.
Kerry, I asked you about this yesterday, but we're all university people, a Jesuit-sponsored ministry. You're in a Jesuit-sponsored ministry, working in America Magazine, being the managing editor. I picture you having meetings around the table in which you all make important decisions about what stories you cover, how you cover them. How does this whole vision of mercy and working for justice affect your day job?
Sure. Yeah. So as I mentioned a little bit, it's all intertwined, and in some ways that's the best. It's the best thing in the world to be able to combine sort of a job I love with values that I hold dear, and to be able to work on that sort of jointly. And the people that I work with are so passionate about these issues and so passionate about what we do, and so intelligent and interesting, and so it's a real blessing. And I think we do see ourselves as a media ministry, as a way to help. It's not just a magazine, it's a way to help people interpret the world for the church and interpret the church for the world, and to bring those things together and to be at that intersection, to help people see God in all things. And I think that's important, and it can be hard to do. And I think sometimes, when I was in high school and college, I worked for our diocesan newspaper and television program in Springfield, Massachusetts, and I worked there for 6 summers. And my friends were like, "You're never getting out of Catholic publishing. What are you gonna do? You're like gonna be there forever." And I think that I'm here now, and I love it still. And it's so wonderful because I think people perceive it as something where you just sit around and write about bishops all day, and that's it. And they see the church as hierarchy, the church as a single person, or in terms of all you care about is the Pope or whatever. And I think the great thing about our faith is that it touches on so many things. There's nothing in our lives that our faith cannot touch on, and that we cannot discuss in light of our faith. And so through that lens, so many things are open to us, and so many things are open to being covered by the magazine. And we have that much more of a chance to kind of be useful to people, to lead a conversation in a way that's meaningful, to try to foster dialogue, to allow people to hear voices that aren't heard otherwise, whether that means talking to people in Rwanda and bringing those voices to the magazine, or whether that means putting an article in by someone you don't expect to see. You don't expect to hear from this person, and you might disagree with them, but maybe they have something worth saying, or maybe they have something you disagree with and you want to say something back. But that dialogue that we hopefully can help foster can help to further the work of the church in the world. And so that's our mission, I think, and our goal. And we have such wonderful smart, kind, intelligent readers who respond and hold us accountable and really encourage. And so it's been really, really great to work there. And sometimes you write something and there's a concrete change, and it doesn't always happen this way, but it can. And I went to Lebanon a couple years ago and reported on this Iraqi refugee family who was in a lot of trouble, and they had a series of very, very difficult things happen to them in their lives. And I wrote this article, and one day I'm sitting in my office, and this guy calls me up and he says, "How many people have called you to help this family?" And I said, "I don't know. You mean no one has called me about this." And he said, "Well, what do you need? Is $20,000 enough? How do we help them? What do we do? How do we get them out of there?" And I connected him with the organization that they had been in touch with, and he helped to get them visas, and he helped to get them into a better living situation. And my part in that is so small. It's so small. It's just telling a story. And the people on either side did the heavy lifting of that. But it's nice to be able to connect those people and to be able to help spur people, to give people the information they need to act. Because we can't act on things that we don't know about. And hopefully by helping to inform people, we can help people to act. Because I think sometimes it's easy to sit in my office in New York and just be in that building all day and feel like, my friends who are teachers, my friends who are social workers, my friends who are sort of out in the field all day, it seems like their work is maybe more direct service or more meaningful. And I think that we can't really discount the work that we do to connect people and the work that we do to help educate people, as so many of you do, to give people the information they need to make that change, to form themselves, to form how they live their lives, and to know how to address injustice, to learn what are these structures, what are these challenges, and how do we sort of do our best moving forward together.
Thank you. One more last thing. The beginning of your book, you have a quote from Pope Francis. Today's Holy Thursday. What do you want to say to us about Francis?
Oh my gosh, Pope Francis, well, if it's any indication, my boyfriend gave me a giant cardboard cutout of Pope Francis for Christmas. So that was an indication of my adoration for him. It's super weird and it's kind of scary in the hallway, but I have to say, we set it up for my pancake party this year, which you probably read about. We had the pancake party and we had Pope Francis set up with a Mardi Gras mask and some beads on, and I kind of it seems, and no one thought of it as sacrilegious. Everyone thought of it as, yeah, this is totally what Francis would be doing if he were here at the pancake party. He would be into this. He would be dressed up. He would be excited, and there's that joy about him that I just love. That I love him being able. I love that joy that he projects, because it's the kind of joy that we're sort of meant to have as faithful Catholics, as part of our faith. And we forget that sometimes because we think about sin, or we think about all the work we have to do, and we think about all the ways that we can improve, but we forget about that joy. And he talks so much about mercy, and it's so wonderful. And he lives it out. He lives it out, and as today he did through the washing of the feet in so many ways. And my sister was sending me article after article after he was elected, saying he's your best PR guy. All he does is talk about mercy. And I think the quote at the beginning of my book, which I pulled from the interview that we did with him at America, is the ministers of the church must be ministers of mercy above all. And I love that word "must." That it's not an option. We don't get to opt out of this. We are required to live merciful lives. And what does that mean? And how do we show that? How do we show that joy? And I think for me, part of that joy of that has been helping as a sponsor in the RCIA program to be able to see the church through sort of the new eyes of people joining for the first time, and to really have my own faith in the church kind of renewed and to be reminded of those parts of my faith and of the church that I really love. And one of the women who received her first communion last year, I think, she went up to receive communion, and the rest of the RCIA crew and sponsors were kneeling in the front pew, and she received, and then she kind of turned and looked at me, and she grinned, and then she just squealed, like, and then ran at me and gave me this big hug. And, like, it was such an unusual event following, receiving the Eucharist, but it made me think about, maybe that's the way we should be reacting. Maybe we should be saying, you understand what is happening here. So those words that Jesus says at, washing the feet of his disciples, do you know what I have done for you? Like, how often do we really think about that? And I love that Pope Francis makes us think about that more and more often and directs it, as much as we're attracted to Francis, he directs it back to Christ. He directs it back to Jesus. And so in that way, he's serving as such a lovely conduit for that grace. And it's been really moving just to see that, and really encouraging as a member of the church to be a part of the church at such a interesting, fascinating time.
Kerry, that is a story to take us into Holy Thursday. That is such a great, joyful story about the Eucharist. Could we thank Kerry, please?
Reading the book, thank you for letting me be a part of this journey with you. And if you're ever in New York and you want to come by America House, please don't hesitate to stop by. We're in Midtown. And if you need a couch to sleep on in Queens, you're more than welcome to stay.
Thank you. Happy Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and a joyful Easter. Thank you for being with us.
Same to you. Thank you.